You know, AI, right? People keep talking. We said this before, right? People keep talking about it taking over the world. Bollocks, absolute bollocks. I've tried 3 times to get on here this evening. Streaming is not available at the moment. Why is that? If they can't even sort something like that out, how's your AI going to start, running businesses? It's nonsense. I'm just going to whinge a bit about it because it's a bugbear with me. I think, people think it's a great thing. It's the best thing since sliced bread, isn't it? It's just nonsense, absolute rubbish. I was on a Teams meeting today, video, if you don't know what that is, like Zoom, right? Teams. I've used it a lot. It was fine for me, right? There were 4 of us in it. Only one person wasn't really there because he couldn't get on it properly and now to use his mobile phone, which I've had before as well. Even a simple thing like that, the technology cannot do it, right? And it's not a one-off. So why don't you sort that out first, you AI bloody nerds? Sort out the teams, sort out this first before you start going on about, we're going to sequence a whole human body. I think I've already done that actually, but that sort of thing, right? It just drives me absolutely nuts. Anyway, let's get on to the topic I'm going to talk about today. And first of all, I've got to make a big apology, right? I feel bad about this. I really feel bad about this, but I'm going to have to do it. So I apologize to everybody who works at Cooper's Brewery because you're going to have to lay a shift off, right? Because I have stopped drinking your beer. Not only your beer, I've stopped drinking any beer. It's nothing to do with Cooper's beer, which is the best beer in the world, in my humble opinion. Anyway, I'm going to have to do it. I've talked a little bit before about how I've been putting on a lot of weight. It's a mixture of stuff, but I know why it happens, right? I know why it happens. It's firstly because I'm drinking I'm drinking too much. That's not a good thing, and I do like beer, and I think I love it actually, but I've only got to look at a half pint, and my belly almost starts to expand. Then, good thing is this: when I've done this in the past, I've stopped drinking in the past when I've got too overweight. It's fairly easy for me to shift the weight, right? All I do is I stop drinking beer and I stop eating crisps. I've mentioned this before. I know I'm going to stop saying that actually. If I repeat stuff, so be it. I'm getting old, you have to bear with me. But the thing is, if I cut out beer completely and I cut out crisps, right? It doesn't matter what else I eat. I don't eat massive amount. I'm not greedy. Tell you what I had tonight, right? I was thinking, what should I do? I've got beef that I cooked yesterday. I did a roast beef yesterday. I got that in the fridge. I've got broccoli. I've got mushrooms and noodles. I thought I'd do a stir fry, and I thought, I can't be bothered. I don't need all of that today. I don't fancy all of that today. So I just did literally beans on toast, bit of butter on the toast, and an egg on top. Right? That's it. Years and years ago, when I was traveling around Australia a bit, when I worked for this one publishing company, you couldn't get like decent food, right? People didn't know olive oil, for example. What am I talking about? Just over 20 years ago. They didn't know what it was really. They didn't use it once you went out in the countryside a bit. When I came back, I was talking to the lady who worked on reception at the publishing company. She said her husband, he was a traveling salesman for years. And she said, some of the motels you go to, their idea of haute cuisine would be an egg on top of the spaghetti, which is right. It's absolutely right. Anyway, it's changed a bit, but not that much. So that's what I had tonight. And it was great. It was fine, right? That's all you need. Anyway, so yeah, it's mainly about the weight, but also the cost, right? The cost of it. Any alcohol now is really expensive, I reckon. I really do. It's gone up tremendously in price in the last sort of 5 years at least. It's ridiculous. And every year, the government slaps on more tax as well, which is really bad, right? Really bad. I mean, not the brewers are going out of business, I would suspect. But anyway, so last time I did this, I was thinking about it, and it was just after I stopped working at News Corp, right? Now, one of the things I do think about this, and it's common enough, I suppose, is I didn't really enjoy it at News Corp in the last days. They were getting rid of a lot of senior folks like me, keeping the young kids, and it was a stressful time. I was made redundant in the end, as were literally hundreds of others at the time, and papers were closed. papers stopped printing. They took it all over to digital with no business plan. They had none. I'm not sure they got one now. Anyway, so yeah, I was always having a drink in the evening. I didn't like working there. I kind of got used to having at least 6 bottles of beer a night, not pint bottles. But anyway, so that was that. And I got really overweight and I wasn't doing a lot of exercise. So when I left there in 2017, right, it took me about 2 months to get back down to a sensible weight. When I say sensible, I'm talking about flat stomach, right? No real exercise, walk twice a day, which I do with the dogs anyway. Well, not here because I don't have the dogs here, but I walk here at least once a day. But yeah, so I lost the weight and it took about 2 months, right? So that's not bad. So I'm going to do it again. Now, there's a couple of things about the beer thing though, right? I actually feel, I've said it before in other places, I feel beer should be given on the National Health Service in the UK, small quantities, bit like how they used to give sailors a, pint of rum or whatever it was on the boat to keep them happy on the ship. I reckon it has got some health benefits, not in terms maybe of, things flowing around your body doing good, quite the reverse, I'm sure. Alcohol's obviously not good for you, but I think emotionally, mentally, small amounts, not a bad thing sometimes. Anyway, that being said, I'm not going to have any, and I'm really going to have to cut it out, and that's how we will go. And what I'm going to do is I'll keep you up to date with how I feel. At the moment, I feel deprived. At the moment, I think several times early evening, it's only, what is it, just before 8 o'clock in the evening. Several times this evening, I thought, maybe I'll just go and have a beer and then I'll start again tomorrow. No, not doing it. You've got to have some willpower, right? Anyway, there's a few other things about beer and things I've found funny over the years. When I was a young boy, I honestly can't remember how old I was, but I'm guessing I would have been about 8, I reckon. And my mum had this friend. I can't even remember her name. Okay. What I do remember are 2 things about her and her husband, right? They lived on the same housing estate as us in Leicestershire. And she was super attractive. Even at the age of 8, I could clearly see this. She had like a bob haircut, black, and but she always wore mini skirts. That was why I probably really noticed her. But the second thing was this, right? This is so weird. So her husband, these people were young at this time, right? They would have been in their, I reckon they would have been in their early 30s tops, late 20s, early 30s. Anyway, he had some kind of like Triumph Dolomite Sprint or something car, like some slightly sporty. But the great thing about it was, so he had this chair and he sat in the lounge there. He was sitting in the lounge, never really said anything. I don't remember him saying anything actually, but he had like a hooded look to his eyes, like he was half asleep, and you could see why by what was next to his chair. He had a pile of nudie magazines, right? Penthouse, Playboy, right? Now, most people hide them, right? Most people hide them, and they certainly don't have them out there in front of their wife. And they had a little kid, but very little baby. But he had them there, this pile. It was like a big pile. I guess he put his mug of tea on it or something. And he had that look about him, and that look was like he just had sex, right? And I don't think it was with her. I reckon he was just doing it with himself, basically, and looking through the magazines. It was the weirdest thing. I always remember it. Anyway, the point is, so she was slim and, fit and all this. Anyway, we went out one lunchtime, the 2 families, and we went to this local pub, sat in the beer garden. It is a long time ago, and I was young, and it's almost like one of those not real experiences. It's more like a sort of dream thing, but it is true. It's honestly true. Anyway, so, the parents were getting drinks. We had some soft drinks, and she ordered a half pint of Guinness, right? And I remember my mum saying, oh, what are you doing? You're drinking beer. Well, now in those days, right, mostly, I don't think women really drank beer, right? I just don't think they did. Maybe they did, but if they did, I never saw them. Anyway, it was weird that she was drinking beer. Anyway, the point is this. What had happened was, when she'd had the child, she'd got anemic, right? She had a low iron count. And the doctor, can you imagine I'm doing this now? The doctor prescribed a half pint of Guinness every day. And she said to me, and it got the iron back up. It did, right? And she told my mum this story, and she said I didn't like it at first at all, but I then got to like it, and I only have a half pint every time we go out, or they had every 2 or 3 days or whatever. So she wasn't boozing it up. But that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, no doctor would do that now. I guess he'd be struck off, wouldn't he or she? Anyway, we'll see. The other thing about it is getting the weight down is a good idea. Nobody really respects you when you're overweight. I'll tell you, that is serious. Back many years ago, I'm talking about 12 years ago, I went for a job at this newspaper, local newspaper. The kids were young and I'd stayed at home to look after them. Wife had gone back to work and I was doing freelance work, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't getting enough money. It really wasn't enough. So I saw a job advertised and it was way beneath me at the time, way beneath me. It was just for a journalist. I'd been an editor, group editor, publisher, chief of staff, all these things. And really it was like a step backwards. But having said that, it was a job, obviously, I knew inside out. It was easy to do. And it was going to provide some money. I had to go for an interview. I was a bit nervous about it, actually, funnily enough, because I'd spent quite a few years freelancing and I was working for big papers like The Guardian and The Bulletin, which was Australia's weekly magazine at the time. But I hadn't been into an office really to speak of and working with people. And so anyway, I went for this interview and I was a bit nervous about it. But then the editor, he came out to meet me in reception and he was the biggest overweight bloke. And it was just a mental thing. I immediately thought, this is fine. I immediately felt I wasn't nervous because if he'd have been real fit, right, muscly, glowing, coming out like that, I would have felt intimidated. That's the reality, right? That's the reality. But I didn't. I saw this big fat bloke and I thought, hey, you're not taking care of yourself, mate. That's what I thought all subconsciously, right? I thought about it afterwards. Anyway, I got the job. It turned out to be, he's a good mate, right? And he struggled with his weight. He really did, not helped by, regular McDonald's and great big McDonald's milkshakes, but that's another story. But anyway, now the other extreme is some of these people who give up alcohol, right? They then become like Seb Verco. Who is Seb Verco? I hear you say. Well, he's a fictional character, right? And he's not a main character in this book Sanctuary by Gary Disher. Now, if you haven't read it and you like crime stuff, you got to go and get this book. I'll just digress very slightly, and I'm not going to go too far because I actually do have notes today. Why I've never done that properly before, I don't know, but I have. Gary Disher, he's 75 now, right? He's been writing books and making a living out of it for about 50 years, but he's never become a really big name, not like Lee Child or Stephen King or any of those other folks, that are well known, household names almost. But I've always read his stuff. I've always read it. I love his stuff. It's so well written. It's nicely written. He's written some great series, of books. Now, this one, Sanctuary, when it came out, The Guardian did a story on him and all about the fact that he was one of these authors who not that many people knew. You only knew about him if you were, a Gary Disher fan, I suppose, really. It's a shame. It's a shame. But look, he's still writing and good for him. And I hope he keeps going. Sanctuary is a brilliant book. Actually, to be honest with you, it feels like a slightly different style to what he's written before. It really does. It feels like he's moved up a gear. It's great. It's really, really good. Beautiful story. Really good. Gripping. Anyway, there's a character in it, Seb Verco, right? And he's one of these like, I don't know what you call them. Those like, excuse me, I've got an itch there. About these male kind of influencers, like Andrew Tate, right? That sort of bloke, So kind of disrespect women, he'll tell you he doesn't, but he does, oh, I'm a man, and I'm strong and I'm fit and I only eat meat, which is what they tend to do, isn't it? They only eat meat. They don't drink beer, don't drink any alcohol, right? They have cold showers. They take ice baths. They go running and they probably grow a beard. Most of them grow a beard, right? It's like your JD Vance type person. I don't know if he has ice baths, but if he doesn't, he bloody should do. But anyway, that's the thing, right? So I'm not going down there. I'm just telling you, not going down there, right? You won't see me with a nice coiffured beard and going, yeah, I only eat T-bone steak. I have 2 of those a day and 14 eggs. I'm not doing it. All I'm going to do is give up the booze. I'm going to tell you every day how I feel. I kind of know how I'm going to feel, I think. But I do want to get the energy back, right? One of the problems is drinking a decent amount of beer every evening, and I never drink in a day, right? But I would say I've got a bit of a problem. I'm not going to say I haven't, because it is hard for me to give it up, but I will. Once I've done a day, 2 days, it's a bit like giving up smoking. When I was giving up smoking, I just went, and I loved smoking, I really did, but it buggered up my sinuses, something rotten. And anyway, when I decided to give up smoking, I thought I'll do a day at a time. And that was fine. That worked. That worked for me, right? And it's the same with beer. I'm not having one tonight. Come tomorrow, I'll feel like having one. I'm not going to have one, right? And we'll keep going. But I will tell you how I feel, because, you tend to get a lot of energy back, which is good. And I haven't had a lot of energy because I'm knackered a lot of the time. I've got a lot of stress on at the moment. I've got to tell you, I don't really want to go into that too much at the moment, because I think it will just be like a whinge fest. But yeah, I'm under a bit of pressure in terms of finances, and I've got a couple of new jobs. The jobs thing, right? There's a couple of them floating at the moment. They're just floating, So I don't know what's going to happen with that. But anyway, what I always try and do is not think too far ahead with these things. There's really no point, If I thought too far ahead, I probably would top myself, because I've got a big mortgage. Somehow it's going to have to be paid. Anyway, we'll see how it goes, right? But yeah, so there we go. Sorry, Coopers. I know a couple of you have been putting your kids through private school on the proceeds of my regular imbibing of your pale ale, which, as I say, is the most wonderful beer. I'm not saying I'm never going to drink it again, but I want to get the weight back down. What I did notice as well, last time I did this, so 2017, 2018, last time I did it, it was interesting, because when I got to a certain stage, right, it was when the weight was right. It was spot on. I wasn't overweight at all. And it was nice. It was really, really nice to be feeling like that. And I was in the supermarket, and I caught a couple of women looking at me, right? Not laughing like they normally would have done because I was overweight. So, yeah, I tell you, it has a difference. That reminds me of a bloke. He used to work with my wife, right? Now, Dave, his name is. He's in his 60s. He's in his early 60s. What happened was, I guess a bit like me, really, he was putting on weight. He wasn't taking care of himself, wasn't watching what he was eating, and he was drinking as well. He got really overweight, and the doctor said to him, listen, you have got diabetes. You could be in big, big trouble with this. Your heart's not going to be good, blah, blah, blah. And he decided, good for him. It's kind of what I'm doing now, I suppose. He decided that he would give it up. He'd eat sensibly, give up the beer, and he'd do plenty of exercise. He actually does a lot of walking. Like, he loves going walking in the bush and stuff like that, right? Anyway, so what happened was and also his wife had passed away, sadly, a couple of years before that. And they, been married since they're about, 12 or something, no, about 15 or 16, 17, 18, I don't know, when they were young. And anyway, cut a long story short, he got his weight right down, right? And he had a coffee with my wife, and he said, it's ridiculous. He said, the women, I can't get rid of them. The women are all over me. She was laughing about it. She's like Dave Mark II, And yeah, apparently, and it was just because he'd lost weight, and he was a bit more confident. And you do become more confident, I feel, when you've lost the weight and you're back to normal. And also the other thing with it is this, I've said this before. There's a guy I don't like particularly, Peter Fitzsimons, and he's a ex-rugby player, and he writes for the Sydney Morning Herald. But he made a very good point that, because he did the same thing, right? And he made a very good point that your body, not technical this, your body's like an elastic band, right? It wants to go back to where it was. I reckon that's absolutely right. I didn't have any problem with it last time. The weight just came off. Anyway, let's see what happens this time, okay? And we'll see how we go. And yeah, Sanctuary, Gary Disher, go out and buy it. Do yourself a favor. It's really good. And yeah, what we'll do is tomorrow we'll get on to another chapter of the book, although the Astrachan's Feather, although I'm going to do it a bit differently, because I learned a few lessons when I was reading it last night. Was it last night or the night before? Time passes so quickly in my interest in life. Anyway, there we go. So look, you have a good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world, usual thing. And I will talk to you tomorrow, and I'll be back here. Take care, folks. Take care. And yeah, be good.